introduce our guest, our plenary guest, Bonnie Kahapea-Tanner. We're blessed to have her with us today. She is the Executive Director and Captain of the Kanehunamoku Voyaging Academy and has been sharing her love of sailing and traditional Hawaiian wayfinding for over 30 years. She has been a crew member on the Voyaging canoe Makali'i and also on our beloved Hōkūleʻa. Let's see, maybe some other highlights. She learned from the Grandmaster Navigator Moananuiākea and Master Navigator Shorty Burlman. And after completing the 3,600-mile 3-month voyage from Hawaii to Saipan, she hoped to open a public charter school, Kanehunamoku Public Charter School. She holds a BA in Hawaiian Studies, an MS in Counseling Psychology, and an MA in Transformative Learning and Change. She lives in Keia with her husband and her 2 daughters. Welcome, Bonnie.
Aloha mai kakou. Just going to run through some of these slides, but I'm really hoping for more of a conversation and question and answer, so I hope I can spark some of your folks' interest in this after lunch hour towards the end of the day. So I'm going to start first with our mo'okuauhau, or our genealogy. O Hōkūleʻa kawahine, o mau ke kani. Noho pulaua aloa'a mai o Makali'i e keiki e keakani. Holoku o Makali'i I ka Moananuiākea. Aloa'a mai o Kanehunamoku ka pula e keakani. Kia aku kamaka I ka ālihilani a uili mai ka mokula. O kualoa ka aina o Kanehoalani kupali na ana e. I ke alapono e holo aku ai a hoi mai. Me ka ike o komua e kau mai nei, e mau mai ka ike a mauloa e. Okay, aloha. So that was our mo'okuauhau of Kanehunamoku, this canoe you see here. Again, my name is Bonnie Kahapea-Tanner, and I'm from Kaneohe, Oahu. And mahalo again for this opportunity to share time and space with you all. My introduction was our genealogy. It honors our canoe, Kanehunamoku, and her mother, Makali'i, which is a double-hull voyaging canoe from Hawaii Island, Kauai, and her grandparents, Hōkūleʻa and Grandmaster Navigator Moananuiākea. So you might be wondering, does this come out? This microphone? Oh, perfect, because I gotta move around, kind of, it gets my jitters out. What was I going to say? Makali'i is wa'a from the Big Island, and you might be thinking, wait, she just said that the canoe Hōkūleʻa and the Master Navigator Moananuiākea, who's a human, how do they make a baby? And I always, in our Hawaiian concepts, we have an idea called hanau makalolo. Has anybody heard about that? Hanau makalolo means to be born of the fontanelle, or the soft spot in our head, which is also one of our piko. Yeah, we have piko-i, piko-o, piko-a. And so what I tell my students is, to be hanau makalolo is to be born of your ideas, to be born of your dreams. So if you think about Hōkūleʻa and the power and the magic that she's brought, not only to Hawaii, but around the world, and the magic of Mao and his giving of his knowledge so freely, that has sparked many dreams and many ideas. And so Makali'i was born of that energy and of those ideas. And then, of course, our canoe, Kanehunamoku, was also born of those ideas. So it's a good way to explain it. We acknowledge our birthplace and the sacred knowledge that has been left to us by our ancestors, and we continue to learn from our ancient wisdom and carry that forward into the future. Today we know that our past largely drives our future and who we each individually will become and what our communities also become. Our community and environment shape us, and keep people in places in our lives, leave an indelible mark upon us. Think about someone or some place or something that has inspired you, and how did that person or place lead you to where you are today? Hold those thoughts in your mind while we look back into a little bit of some history. I want to give some context. Perhaps some of you know, but Hawaii was discovered and inhabited by Polynesians over 1,000 years ago from canoes made of natural materials and handmade tools. They used the stars, the swells, animals, and everything in the environment to guide their canoes thousands of miles to Hawaii, to a place they had never seen before. And they continued to make round-trip voyages for hundreds of years. The round-trip voyage is what is really important, right? Sometimes it's easy to go somewhere. Sometimes it's difficult to come back, even in our current contemporary lives, right? It's easy to go, move away, live somewhere else, but the difficulty is always to come back home. So the really important thing about voyaging and wayfinding is that it's a round trip. You have to be able to get back home at some point in your journey. So over time, culture and practice was refined and long-distance voyaging stopped, and eventually the knowledge of wayfinding was lost. Native Hawaiians not only lost our ability to navigate, but we lost our culture, we lost our land, and we lost our language. But in the 1970s, the Native voice began to organize and the Native Hawaiians began to take action. I'd like to highlight 4 key movements that began in the 70s and really bring us to where we are today, to this exact day. During the 1970s and the years leading up to it, Native Hawaiians were being displaced from their lands. The mass evictions in Waimanalo, San Island, Waiakole, Waikani, to name a few. These events have lasting effects and trauma in our community. But at the same time, there were movements to lead Native Hawaiians back to the culture. The revival of the Native Hawaiian language through the Punana Leo Hawaiian language preschools were born during this time and started to open up in the 1980s access to Hawaiian language immersion through the Department of Education. The third movement was the formation of the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, who fought to stop the bombing of the island by the U.S. military. The PKO, or the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, used the cultural practices and ceremonies of makahiki to fight the U.S. and eventually won, stopping the bombing. And the fourth was the movement to reclaim our voyaging heritage. This is the voyaging canoe, Hōkūleʻa. Hōkūleʻa was created to prove that Polynesians, Hawaiians, had not only the natural resources, but the intellect to create a voyaging canoe and to sail it to Tahiti and back using the natural elements. At the time, there was much debate in academia that Polynesians were not smart enough or skilled enough to navigate across the ocean. Scholars like Andrew Sharp argued that Polynesians were victims of storms and they didn't have the ability to make purposeful voyages across the ocean. In the 1940s, some of us might remember this story of Thor Heyerdahl. He built the raft called Kon-Tiki with the argument that Polynesians drifted from across the ocean and accidentally landed upon islands. But in the 1970s, memories of stories, chants, and historical accounts reminded us of a different narrative. The first voyaging canoe in hundreds of years, Hōkūleʻa, was launched on March 8, 1975. We just celebrated her 50 years. The canoe was designed by Herb Conning. He was a Hawaiian historian and artist. It was made of modern materials, but the canoe was designed using historical counts and as true to design as possible. There was one major challenge. Anybody know what that challenge was with the Hōkūleʻa?
Size of sails?
Not the size of sails, but we've definitely gone through many iterations over the 50 years of the size. What was the one key thing that the Hōkūleʻa was missing?
The material of the sail.
Navigator. We had no navigator. So what I share is that the canoe was born without eyes. Okay? The canoe was born without eyes. Makapo, no can see, yeah? And so there was no one to navigate the canoe. They were just learning how to sail it. And then this man came to us, P.S. Maupiailo. He came to us by way of a Peace Corps worker who was stationed on the island of Sarawal in Micronesia. Sarawal is a small island of only 1 mile long and a half-mile wide. And at the time, he was in his 40s, what I consider very young to have that type of knowledge. He was already an accomplished navigator in his home. He agreed to navigate Hōkūleʻa to Tahiti using the sacred knowledge he had learned from his grandfather and from his father. Mau successfully navigated Hōkūleʻa to Tahiti, as you can see here in this picture. This is said to be the largest gathering of Polynesian people in known history. This event sets into motion the revival of non-instrument navigation and voyaging culture and practice for the next 50 years. Today, Hawaii has 7 voyaging canoes, and there are over 20 more voyaging canoes throughout Moananuiākea, the Pacific Ocean. Hōkūleʻa voyages to all major islands of Polynesia, reawakening the people, and she becomes an icon and an ambassador of the Hawaiian culture and pride. From her launch till today, Hōkūleʻa sailed around the world, inspiring us all. And then we come to the tools. Any questions yet on this so far, what I shared? Nobody? Okay, so the tools. So you see here on the left, that is the Micronesian star compass called the Pafu. When Mau came here, he didn't speak very much English. And so he had to, he taught in his native language of Micronesian. So it took the Hawaiians a little bit of time to kind of catch on. But he shared with them this very basic tool, the Pafu, the Hawaiian star compass. And then here on this side, you see what many of you may have seen now, because it's pretty popular. This is the Hawaiian star compass that was created by Nainoa Thompson in the late 70s, early 80s, to be able to teach students in a more scientific way and mathematical way about the navigation. Has anyone learned the Hawaiian star compass? Has anyone seen one out there, maybe in an art display or something like that? Yes, they're very beautiful, and also on a lot of t-shirts and things like that too. So I think what's really important about the concept of the star compass, you see in this one is a bird, and in Mau's compass, it's hard to see in that photo, but there's a little canoe there. And so the idea is that you are the center of the compass. We are the center of the compass. If this is our canoe right here in this room today, we are in the center. So we have control over what we do and what we say and how we interact with nature and how we direct ourselves where we want to go. So the star compass is a really powerful tool. It gives us a sense of place and a sense of belonging. Each section in the star compass is called a house, and there are 32 houses in the compass. Of course, how many degrees are in a circle? 360. So you think 32, that's kind of strange. Why isn't it 36? Because you could just divide it by 10. But that actually doesn't work. 32, what I like to say, is a magic number. Because if you divide 32, any math wizards out there that want to divide 360 by 32, or anyone quick on your phone, I can tell you if no one wants to guess. It's 11.25. And then you go, that's even more of a weird number. Now I have to go in like a fraction. That's strange, right? And you're thinking, whoa, this is really crazy. But let's do something real quick. I'm going to put this down. If I stand here, right, all around me 360, right? So if I put my hands up, everyone put your arms up like this, right? So from one hand to the other is how many? 180. 180. Okay, now you're going to half that. What do you get? 90. Okay, half it again. 45. Okay, half it again. 22.5. Guess what if you have to go on It's a magic number. Because everything in nature, we have to be able to use not any type of technology or instruments, right? We use our bodies to do this. So if you're talking about a house that's 11.25, we can divide that up just using your own self. You don't need any other tools or instruments to help you do that. So 32 is the magic number, and that's how we get the houses. So that goes around like that. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's pretty cool. I always tell people, and people are usually pretty amazed at the 32 thing. So they're like, what? Yeah, it's totally amazing. And you can have that with your body. And when we do a lot of things in voyaging, all of it has to do with nature and our relationship with nature. So if you look at the compass, up in the north we have Akau. Everyone say Akau.
Akau.
And then south we have Hema.
Hema.
And then Hikina is east. Everyone say Hikina.
Hikina.
And Komohana.
Komohana.
North, south, east, west. So we're all pretty familiar with that. And then Ko'olau. Everyone say Ko'olau.
Ko'olau.
That's our northeast quadrant. And then Malanai.
Malanai.
Southeast. And then up at the top, Ho'olua. That's northwest, and southwest is Kona. Okay, very good. And then what Nainoa did was he named all those houses so that it would be easier to memorize. So that gives us some reference points. And there's some story that goes with it too. So we have up here, if we start at Haka, everyone say Haka,
Haka,
Naleo,
Naleo,
Nalani,
Nalani,
Manu,
Manu,
Noyo,
Noyo,
Aina, La. And then you can see it just repeats itself, right? So it repeats itself as it goes around. So if we're in the center and we want to sail to, let's say we want to sail to Tahiti, we're going to maybe turn the bow of the canoe to Noyo Malanai. Yeah, and so it's all about angles. So it gets kind of technical, but if you just think of it in a simple way, the head of the bird is the front of the canoe. So you point your bird to the direction you want to go. That means the tail of the bird is directly behind. And then your outstretched wings are on your 45s like that, or 90s. And so that's how you navigate, is you're aligning different things in nature to your canoe that's in the center of the compass. So what are some things in nature that we could use to navigate with?
Waves.
Stars, waves, birds, wind, sun, moon, fish. Yes, fish. Anyone else? Clouds. Yeah. Everything in nature we use. Everything. Even the fish. Fish are really important. Even if we look in nature, there are navigators amongst us all the time. Does anyone know any local animal things that we see that are navigators here in Hawaii? Whales. Very good. Whales are excellent navigators, right? That's how they come here every time. How do they do that? It's like life's mystery, right? It's like so amazing. Do they use the stars too? Maybe. We don't know, right? I think there is some discussion about that they do use some of the stars to navigate. Yeah. What else do we have that visits Hawaii? The Hōkūleʻa, yeah. And there's other migratory birds too, but the Hōkūleʻa is really popular. And so we know that those birds also navigate here. So if you think about it, in nature, you go way back in time, like how did Mao's great-great-great-grandfather figure out how to navigate? Well, they had this relationship with nature that was so close. It was such an intimate relationship that it was reciprocal. And it wasn't like one more than the other, right? They used the navigation, they made a relationship with nature, and they understood nature so well that they used it to navigate for thousands of years to feed themselves, to feed their families, to go visit relatives. Yeah, it was a very practical way and necessary way to keep that human connection together. Any questions? Yes?
I read somewhere that in some movie that it was from the southern hemisphere. And so how do you figure out the Hawaii northern?
So Mao's from the northern hemisphere, but your question is still good. It's how did he know how to get to Tahiti? Because the stars are the same, but they're in a totally different place. I mean, when you go south, our northern stars you can't see the North Star anymore. So that's why I feel like what he did in 1976 was so remarkable to make that change from his northern hemisphere sky to a southern hemisphere sky. And he said he knew how to do it because his grandfather told him. And it's like, okay. Right? I mean, he did it. But there was a lot of hardship on that first voyage. And there was a lot of pressure on him, of course. And sometimes there was doubt. And there was so much doubt that it created problems on the voyage, right? So much so that when they arrived in Tahiti and I showed that slide of the big celebration, Mao actually left, right? It's in the National Geographic movie if anyone wants to look that up later. But he actually left because he was so upset that everyone couldn't get along. Because when they're on their canoes in Micronesia, the navigator is the father. And the father is responsible to keep the family safe and to keep the family fed. And so for him, he felt that he was disrespected because they doubted him. And then there was internal problems amongst the crew. And so he was like, you guys are crazy. Like, in my culture, we don't question the navigator. And so he left. And so when Hōkūleʻa came home for the first time, when Hōkūleʻa left in 76 to come back to Hawaii, she came back using modern tools, compass and sextant. Yeah. And then the canoe got parked and left for a long time, until 1978 when they tried to go again. And by that time, Nainoa had started to try and self-teach himself because he was very interested. And but then in 1978, anybody remember what happened on that voyage? Yeah, that's when they capsized and we lost Eddie Aikau. And so because of that loss of life, which is the most precious thing you can lose, Nainoa went back to Mao and asked him to please come back to Hawaii and teach. And Mao agreed because he said he didn't want anyone else to lose their life over trying to learn the wayfinding. And so then Mao did come back, and then in 1980, Nainoa did successfully navigate and is credited to be the first Hawaiian navigator in modern history. But it came at a lot of sacrifice. Yeah, so the voyaging community, we understand that. We understand that sacrifice that took place. So now we're like, we're indebted to Mao and his family for all that they have shared with us. Because they didn't just share their dad, right? They shared their sacred knowledge, which at that time was like not okay in their community to share that because it was sacred and it was only passed down from the family. So he took a lot of heat for that to come to Hawaii all those years to share.
On a regular basis?
In the old days?
Yeah.
Yes.
So where were the navigators? The last ones?
So the last ones that we know about are in the stories, right? So Pele, right? We all know Pele. Anybody heard of Kahai, Mo'ikeha, Hawaii Loa? These are all navigators. But this is like a long time ago. So once Hawaii got established and the culture started to grow, right? Like our fish ponds and our taro systems, we have some of the best and most engineered, I think, in the world. And so once the Hawaiian culture got established, and I think there were some political things that happened also in Tahiti, and so then voyaging stopped across Polynesia for sure. And that's how the knowledge got lost. But in Micronesia, they continued to do it. So when Polynesian Voyaging first started and they were looking for navigators, they were only looking in Polynesia, right? But then who makes those lines? The island people don't make, even today, we don't make those lines, right? Other people make those lines. But they were looking in Polynesia to find a Polynesian navigator. But they found one, and he was already very old, and he said he wouldn't teach them. He said no. So Micronesia was still practicing voyaging, still doing the wayfinding, and that's how they found Mao, through a Peace Corps worker that had heard about it and then brought him here to Hawaii to meet with the Polynesian Voyaging Society, and that's when Mao agreed to do it.
So the advancement of the culture prevented any more long-distance navigation?
I think so, yeah, I think so.
I just wondered about Mao's family now. Are they still at home, or did they come back and forth?
This is a great question. We just celebrated Hōkūleʻa's 50th, so we got to see a bunch of them again. And then last year we had the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture, and so that was also another good time for the voyaging families to come together. But I still keep very close contact with Mao's, two of his children, his son and his daughter. His daughter lives here on Oahu, and his son, and a lot of them live on the continental US, in Missouri. I'm like, there's no ocean there. And they're like, what? And I'm like, because he's like, I'm moving with my daughter, she lives in Missouri. And I'm like, Pasito, there's no more ocean. And he's like, oh no. Now he tells me there's the white ocean over there. It's the snow. But a lot of Micronesians live in Iowa, Texas, and Missouri. I'm not exactly sure why, but probably because of the economics. But they, we know that the Micronesian community here in Hawaii is suffering, and they take a lot of, they're not doing the best. So we try in our little ways, with our little canoe, try and do as much as we can to engage them and help them and remind them that they come from a great, great culture that saved Hawaii. And not just Hawaii, but the other Polynesian places that have learned from Mao. Yeah. Pretty much most of the voyaging you see, except for some in the Solomon Islands, is all because of Mao, from one person. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I'll go through a couple more slides, but I do love the questions, so keep them coming. Then I don't have to wear my glasses too. Okay, so the compass. Okay, so here's someone navigating. This is on the Voyaging Canoe Makali, and you see he's got his arms stretched out like this, like in the movie Moana. You guys all saw the movie Moana? A lot of that is factual. So I like it. I think it's a good movie. It's good for young people to see, because that's the kind of stuff they like watch. He's navigating. So just like on that compass, how we talked about the degrees, he's measuring there. I'm going to take a guess, one house. Yeah, so for me, one house is just from my thumb to my knuckle. It's about 11.25 degrees if I stretch it out like that. And so he's measuring, he's navigating. But you need lots of clues in nature to navigate, not just one clue. We cannot just use one star. We can't just use one swell. It's all the things that come together that help us to guide us over the long distances. Any questions about that? No? All right. Okay, I'm going to share a little bit about being a crew, because this is another, I would say, beauty of voyaging is the family. The family that gets created when you're on the deck of a canoe together. It's like instinctual, it's automatic. You learn over time about people's strengths and their challenges. You learn their little habits, just like you do in your own families. You learn all these little quirks. How do you deal with those kinds of things? When maybe your bunkmate or the person right next to you snores and you're trying to sleep because you're off watch. How do you deal with that? Well, you gotta have some patience, you gotta have a lot of grace, you you gotta have a lot of compassion for each other, because the voyage is the priority. The canoe is the priority, right? So we as the crew members are all working towards the same goal, and the goal is very clear, and the leadership is very clear. So that's why I think a lot of people gravitate towards the canoe, just like how people gravitate towards maybe sailing or hiking Everest and all these kind of like pilgrimage kinds of things that people do, or that humans do and have done over centuries, is because of the closeness that you get with each other and the closeness that you get with nature. And I think that's a very spiritual journey. So, of course, you see this is our little canoe here, Kanehunamoku. Even though it's little, it still cannot be sailed by one person. It takes a crew and it takes a community. There's different kuleana, like the navigator, and there's all kinds of other things too, like a captain, a watch captain, the cook. And the cook is actually, most people will say, the most important person, because the cook feeds us. And you know, when you have a good meal together, everyone's spirits are lifted, right? Maybe it's been raining and cold and wet for the last 3 days, and the cook comes up and like cooks Simon. And then you're like, yes, Simon, we get to have Simon. And it makes everyone happy. And it brings everyone's, spirits up, yeah? So in the end, everyone is crew, and it's really a special bond that happens when you're at sea for an extended period of time. For every person that gets to sail on the deck of a canoe, big or small, there are so many more that are the supporters, the land crew, the canoe builders, the canoe maintainers, family members, farmers, sailmakers, provisioners, that create this whole voyage. So it's never just the people that are on the canoe. It's always much bigger. Every person is essential to the success of the canoe, from where you leave to where you're getting. And the overarching concept is that everyone is important. There are no free rides. It's a kako thing. To tie this all together, history tells us that we're resilient, and that despite many challenges, the Hawaiians are still here. We still have our voyaging canoes, and that we do have the intellect to achieve greatness just as our ancestors did. We have a compass. Again, this is another compass on the Tahitian canoe, but it's basically the Hawaiian star compass, but in their language. And the compass is something that connects us and binds us all together as voyagers. And here's another shot of us. So there's, again, sail training on Kaneohe Bay, on our Kanehunamoku. It takes a whole crew. Yeah, okay. Any more questions? Yes?
You shared that on that first voyage, Uncle Naukialu was, as journeys have happened, that have changed or shaped that kind of hierarchical understanding?
Yeah, I think so. The first voyage was really a science experiment. And so there were scientists on board, right? And they had to keep their science pure, right? So no watches, no radios, no anything, no contact. And so that first voyage was really important because we had to break through that to then where now we have our own navigators. We don't have to prove anything anymore to anyone, and we can navigate and voyage on our own. So I think that's the big difference from 1976 to the voyages that were after, is there are scientists on board now, but they're doing other things like checking out plankton and microplastics and things like that. We're no longer needing to prove that we're smart, right? We don't have to prove that. It's been done. And so even though that first voyage did have its challenges, which I think happens anytime you try and do something new, you're gonna have a lot of people that, oh, they're never gonna make it, this is crazy, they're not gonna, the canoe will never make it that far, it's gonna fall apart. Like all those things were said back then, but they made it. And there was challenges, but yes, we learned from those, and now we have our own navigators. So Hawaii has 7 what we call po navigators, or those are navigators that were basically like ordained by Mao. So 5 before his passing, and then 2 post his passing. And then those are like master navigators, and then there's many other navigators in training and navigators that are continuing to learn. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Yes.
Did you have, like, can you describe any kind of spiritual practice that you may have had on board, especially for the long voyages?
Yeah, I think, continuing to grow in that. For us on Makali'i, which is, right behind me, this is Makali'i. On our canoe Makali'i, very special, when this canoe was born, Mao blessed it with magic. And I think their concept, or we think of the word magic and I think of, the bunny out of the hat. But magic is really spiritual. It's our spiritual connection to Akua, to nature. And so on Makali'i, when we're sailing, she is a living being. And I think when you're in nature, when you're close to nature, the magic just happens. And it's kind of undescribable, I think, at times. It's a rainbow, it's a dolphin, it's a certain whale. And there's all these things that happen that really bring the individual and the crew as a collective closer to nature. And I think, nature to me can be described as Akua, yeah? Or whatever it is, whoever that your higher power is. But I think that's the closest you can come to nature, or come to Akua, is through something like this. At least it has been for me, yeah? It's like, I'll just share I want to share 2 stories, because your fish story, I want to get back to that. But one story was when we were on this canoe Makali'i, my first voyage was 3 months. But we kind of like hop, skip, jump. So the longest leg was 21 days from Hawaii Island to Majuro. It was about 2,100 miles. It took us 21 days. And on that voyage, when we first left Big Island, it was rough. And we didn't know what we were doing. We were young. I mean, our navigator and captain, they knew what they were doing, but most of the crew were young, right? They call us green, right? Greenhorns or whatever, we're green. We didn't really know what we were doing, and it was super rough for like the first 24 hours. We couldn't even sail, we were just drifting. And then eventually the wind died down, we started making way, we started sailing. And so now we get into this routine, right? So we're on for 6 hours, and so you're up and working, and then you're off for 6 hours, and then you're up again. So you work 12 hours in a 24-hour period. And so in the beginning, our feet are sore, our hands are sore, our arms are sore, all of our muscles are like aching, because now we're working a lot, right? 12 hours out of 24. And then you're not really resting the whole 12 that you're off, because that's your time to take a bath, that's your time to wash your laundry, that's your time to write in your journal, right? So there's all these things, but you get into this beautiful rhythm out there, and life gets really simple, right? I get up, I do my job, I'm following whatever the navigator and captain say, I'm helping maybe wash dishes, I'm helping cook the meal, but that's it. There ain't no email to check, there ain't nothing. This is pre-cell phones too. This is 1999. And, but as we're sailing along and we're learning and we're getting better, right? And our captain's getting more confident in our steering. Navigator's happy because we're steering straight and not going all over the place and making it hard for him. But then it started to rain, and it rained for like 3 days. Actually, maybe it was just 2, but it rained a lot, and we were wet. We're just wet. And it's like, oh, we're wet, sleeping in wet clothes. And this canvas you see, right behind that canvas is where the bunks are. But at that time, Makali'i had a really old, well, it was only 4 years old, but it leaked. And so it was like leaking and dripping on my head while I was trying to sleep, and I just was like getting crazy, and my mind started to go a little crazy on me. And I was just like, I can't handle this anymore. And I just remember kind of like flying out of my bunk. I jumped up on deck and I was just like, I don't know what I was thinking I was going to do. Like, where was I going to go? Couldn't go nowhere, right? So I jumped up on deck and I just happened to look over the side of the canoe, and I swear to God, I saw a white whale. And this white whale just came right along the canoe, right past where I was standing on the side, looking over, trying to figure out. I'm telling myself, I need to get my act together. I cannot be losing it out here. My crew needs me. And this white whale just came right along the canoe and went past. And after that, the sun came out. I dried my clothes, and I felt a whole lot better. You know, so it's just these little signs that remind you about the power of nature. And I think that's like the spiritualness that you can get from that. And I've been really fortunate since this voyage that I work with students, and we've been able to take them out to sea on these 10-day voyages, but not on our little canoe. We take this sailboat called Moananuiākea, which is a 3-masted schooner, and we've been able to really recreate and create really magical moments for these youth, and it's really been amazing. We'll get to the end, so okay, the fish story. So same voyage, now we're sailing towards Mao's Island. So we've already been like greeted at all these different islands along the way. We're meeting his family. He's so happy because he's finally he's sailing to his own places. For the 20 years prior with Hōkūleʻa, he sailed all through Polynesia, but never home to show his family, hey, this is what I've been doing every time I dig out for 6 months and I'm hanging out with the Hawaiians. So he was really happy to be able to show his community and his people that this is what he's been doing, and he was so proud. And so so now we're getting, after we go to Majuro, then we go to Pohnpei, Kostrai, Chuuk, and then we go into the what they call the outer islands. And this is where the culture is still very much intact, yeah? So they're still wearing their traditional clothing, they still have to get all their food from the ocean and from the land. And so we leave this one island, and the next island is gonna be Sarawak. And so we're really excited too, right? We're like, this is what we've been waiting for. We're so excited to get to Sarawak, just to see what it's like, and to meet his family and meet the people there. And so we're sailing, and it's a beautiful day with light winds, and we're sailing along, and Mao would sleep in that compartment, kind of right where you see these railings there. His house was right there in that first section. And he would usually just kind of sit up in, we call it the hole, and he would usually just kind of sit up in there and kind of look around and make sure that we were all good and doing our jobs. And that day, we were running fishing lines. And so the fishing is reserved for the men. That's their job. So the fishing lines were out. But in the back, there's also where you go to use the bathroom. So I was out using the bathroom on this beautiful day, beautiful wind. We're moving along. We're sailing towards Sarawak. And I get back there to use the bathroom, and we get a fish on the line. So now there's all this commotion, right? Fish on, hanapa, hanapa. And so I get out of there, so all the guys are rushing into the back to pull up the fishing line, and they pull up the fishing line, and they fly the fish onto the deck, and it lands close to Mao, and he said, and he looks at the fish head. Well, okay, by the time it got on the deck of the canoe, there was only the head. So a shark had bitten off the back of the fish. Mao looks at the head of the fish, and he goes, oh, look down, look down. And we're like, what? We're in the deep ocean. What are you talking about? We looked down. Sure enough, we were over a seamount. The fish we caught was an uku. Anyone know what an uku is? Does that fish live in the deep ocean? It's not like an ahi or a marlin, right? It is a bottom fish. We were over the seamount. But Mao didn't see the seamount. He was in his hole. All he saw was the head of the fish. He knows his ocean so well that all he had to see was a type of species of fish, and he knew exactly where he was in the entire Pacific Ocean. And he said, oh, make a little bit this way and go straight. Tonight we see my island. And sure enough, that sunset, we pulled up and anchored at Sarawak. So that's how fish can be our navigators. They can tell us where we are. I love that story. I think it's so cool because it tells us that he knows nature so well. So well. So like things like this, you know, when you see this at sunset, you just go, wow, how blessed to be in that time and space. Rainbows for us on the voyaging canoes are something we just cherish to see. When we see rainbows, we just know that we're having an amazing time. You know, it's just like nature is just happy. I think I got this whale shot in here to remind us that the whales are our navigators. We can learn a lot from them. Hard to see on this slide, but this was just last week up at the crater, and I wanted to show the stars there in the background. You can kind of see them. Orion's belt there. Yeah, nature is so important, and when we think of Pele, we think of our navigator as well. And then, of course, birds. This is a Kauae ula, or a tropic, what do they call it? A red-tailed tropic bird. It's the only bird, I think, that can actually fly backwards. Again, navigating. This is one of our captains, Pualani Lincoln, and teaching one of our students. That island in the background is Nihoa. And Nihoa is an island past Kauai and Niihau, about 300 miles, or 180 miles or so. And it's the last of two basalt islands past Niihau in the Hōkūleʻa National Marine Monument. And this island here is Mokumanamana, which is a very special island. It lies on the Tropic of Cancer, and it is the place where this whole island is very small. It's covered with heiau and remnants of civilization there. And the heiau there have been studied for the last about 20 years by the Edith Kanakole Foundation. And what they've found through their research is that the heiau are all aligned to the stars. So each star, like when you watch maybe Scorpius or Maui's fishhook setting, there is literally a upright stone for each of the stars in that constellation. It's really amazing.
Is it Hawaii?
Yes. If you look at this photo, this is me here on the left. And do you see my shadow? So this is on the solstice, which means the sun is directly above, and so then your shadow is within your body. We call it happens here in the main islands, they call it Lahaina noon. And you have to look up when the sun's going to be crossing our latitude, and you can do the same thing. But this is just kind of, I wanted to show these photos about us taking students out into nature and the experiences that we get to have, and that we do ceremony with the students to really help them connect more deeper spiritually.
Where is the island with all the else? Is it around here?
So it's about 600 miles northwest of here in the National Marine Monument. People used to call it the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, and now it's named Kanehunamoku National Marine Monument. It goes all the way to Midway.
Okay, so the next question is, were there people living there but they have heiaus, or?
What they think is people live there seasonally, and maybe some people stayed long term, but there wasn't really enough fresh water to sustain a large community. But for the amount of heiau that are built there, it's mind-boggling. Like, how did they actually do that? It's amazing. Yeah.